Okay, another Bolt EV road trip, this time for National Drive Electric Week.
Hi and welcome to another plug and play EV video. This one looks at the trip down to New York City to test drive the Polestar 2. Obviously the trip was mostly for the test drive there, and we have that video up already, which we'll link down in the description and up in the corner somewhere here. But the trip down was interesting as well. New York City is a single charge journey there if you take it to the northern suburbs and kind of park up in Westchester or one of the Connecticut suburbs and get the train in. Obviously this time preferred to stick in the car, get into the city itself and have a walk. It was Sunday, so it wasn't particularly busy, and it's not too bad to drive around the city on that particular day. So chose to do that. We went down through I-95, through Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and then into New York State and down into the city via Queens. It was, you know, fairly quick, nothing that we haven't done before, but some of the interesting things that came up along the way I thought were worth reviewing, and we visited a few places that we wouldn't normally have done if it was just a, you know, straightforward road trip. Or a few new charging locations, a few places that we wanted to have a look on the way down. So that's what this video looks at. We'll cut through to the different places along the way.
Not reset here yet, we will in a sec, but the interesting thing to note is this is right after our warm weather range test. So we're at 5 miles per kilowatt hour, which is comfortably more than 300 miles, as we know. And still, the GOM wants to head back towards 277. Again, it's just erring on the side of caution. It's saying, you know, don't count your chickens before they've hatched. Make sure you monitor this all the way down. But that's a stark contrast to what you would get in the 2017 Bolt Premier that we had, which was much more likely to read, you know, we've seen it on road trips that we've done before, where we start out and it reads 330, 350, you know, crazy high miles, and that you knew you would never achieve, but still interesting. But for now, we are still comfortable, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, heading south.
So the first stop was for coffee, which won't surprise anyone who knows the channel or follows the Coffee and Kilowatts series. We are caffeine junkies here. So I stopped off to grab some coffee at a Panera, but this site is also a Target site where Electrify America is going to put in one of its charging stations along I-95 in Westwood, Massachusetts. So I had a quick stop in there just to skim around the outside. It's only been up on their coming soon chart for a couple of weeks at the time, so I wasn't expecting too much. Didn't find too much, but it was worth a quick stop. Okay, so no Electrify America station as yet, but we did use unlimited coffee subscription to get some human juice. So that should power us on our way. They don't tend to put them in more service kind of areas. A lot of the Electrify Americas are in the main parking lot, sometimes a bit too close to the entrance, but more often than not I find EA's been pretty good about getting them far enough away that you're not taking up the premium parking real estate. So a few more added recently at Bank of America's around Massachusetts, and you start to see the Boston and Greater Boston area becoming very packed in with these Electrify America sites. You're not going to have to go very far along the interstate, a bit further, especially I-95, but also I-495 to find these stations. Unsure whether these are going to be the smaller community sites with a J1772 plug. Looking at Target, obviously it's a big provider. This site was really good. Lots of restaurants, grocery stores, all kinds of places for you to eat and drink. So that was a promising kind of site. Worth a look, and you know, it's always good to check in on these things and see how long it takes from popping up on the map to actually having a site in the ground and activated. So human fueling aside, we had the first charging stop of the trip down in Rhode Island. First time I've charged there actually, and this site was also pretty new, only went in over the summer. It's one of the park and ride stations in Rhode Island. Not a big state obviously, but they have locations where you can park up and get the bus in if we were in times where we commuted more regularly. But these are interesting stops. This one was, you know, useful for us just to check out. It was complimentary, which is always a bonus. Charge point, 62.5 kilowatt charge point express stations, so that's good for the Bolt EV. Get your full 50 to 55 kilowatts charging rate below 55%. We stopped right on the cusp of that taper point, so we were only just at, I think, 52%, as you'll see on the footage here. But it was a good place to check out. You know, the plus side, 2 stations. We turned up with a Hyundai Kona electric on the other plug, and we were able to you know, plug right in because of that redundancy. It was the state's Dieselgate settlement funds at the state level, so good to see them thinking about redundancy, having the backup there, 2 cars charging at the same time, fast charging, no problem, and also 6 J1772 charge point plugs as well, so some redundancy there. If you happen to come up and 2 cars were charging, you could plug in, at least juice up a little bit. If for whatever reason the fast chargers aren't operable, you can plug in and still get a charge to get onto the next place if you really need it. Always does seem good to have that J1772 backup option, not only to keep serving, you know, plug-in hybrids. They're not the most expensive pieces of equipment in the world, you know, 10 to 15,000 a station for a J1772 dual head, so it tends to make sense, I think, if you're spending 6 figures, you know, high 6 figures on a site. One of these going in at a lower power just gives a nice little bit of redundancy. The site itself, Park and Ride, is a little bit odd. You know, there's nothing there. You couldn't go to the restroom. There's no facilities, amenities, that kind of thing. So it becomes a little bit of a question mark over, well, okay, you're going to stay with your car if you're fast charging, but if you're in a level 2 plug, it's probably going to be leaving your car for the day. I don't see anybody plugging in for any amount of time there in leisure activities or anything that you know, is much more than a flying stop or intending to park there all day. But obviously this is something that states are thinking about, because we're now seeing New York and the New York Power Authority put in these level 2 sites at Park and Ride stations. You could see someone stopping off, charging all day, or the majority of the work day, and coming back to a full charge. That would certainly make you happy, but it makes you wonder how many people are going to be able to use this. If, you know, there are 6 plugs even in a car park or a parking lot that has hundreds of spaces, you can easily see it's going to be plugged in there for most of the workday, unless you can somehow, you know, come back, move your car at lunchtime, something like that. Obviously, it's there's something to it because New York State's investing in it, you know, pretty heavily. Rhode Island seems to have done this at a lot of their Park and Ride sites. So we'll keep an eye on those and see how those kind of commuter parking lots develop in terms of electric vehicle charging options. For us, it was a good opportunity to just jump off, check out the site, get a quick bump in charge to get down to New York and carry on the journey. The service station here, but we'll hop off, do a bio break and see how long it would take for the most basic of stops.
In a quarter mile, merge onto I-95 South.
Well, there you go. This is worth noting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 superchargers there with Tesla chargers, but no non-Tesla. So that's an interesting thing for Connecticut to work on. Obviously everything is already there. We'll have a quick look at it in a sec. To the human fuel versus charging, because I had to stop to go to the restroom, partially because there were no facilities at the Rhode Island stop, so you can see that again isn't the most efficient way to have your charge / rest stops. But the rest area in Connecticut did have a bank of 10 Tesla superchargers, and this seemed to be quite a common occurrence that, you know, just looking at the rest areas as we went by, it seemed to have a lot of Tesla infrastructure across Connecticut. But it was odd that they had, you know, granted Tesla the amenities and the site to do that, and not chosen to add anything themselves as a state. Connecticut seems to be somewhat behind in charging infrastructure. They seem to have funds, but they haven't necessarily invested them along these major routes, which are, you know, big commuter routes between the city of Boston, Providence, the commuter towns along the coast in Connecticut, and then New York City. But it was an opportunity to see, you know, a 15-minute rest break, just going to the restroom, grabbing a coffee, and then walking back to the car. You know, in a car that's charging at 125, 150 kilowatts, that's going to get you a good chunk of your battery back. We didn't get anything from that, obviously. That was not intended as a charging stop, but it was interesting to see the Tesla infrastructure already there. and the potential to do much more, to even just put in, you know, a couple of DC fast charging stations as we'd seen in Rhode Island. Hopefully Connecticut will be investing more for public charging and also just any model that is not a Tesla. So then moving on through Connecticut, down through the coast on I-95, you know, you get into the commuter towns where everyone pretty much takes the rail. Anyway, we continued through down into the city, got some decent views of Manhattan coming in from the east in Queens, and then visited or stopped up in a parking garage in Long Island City, Queens, which is pretty useful because it had well, a bank of EV Connect level 2 chargers, but also notable that there were 3 or 4, couldn't quite tell how many were actually going to be installed, but 3 or 4 DC fast chargers going in there, probably going to be 50 kilowatts, can't see them having a higher power level there, but you know, very interesting to see those being installed in a big city centre behind a paid parking lot gate.
There's the EV Connect app. Our charging session is underway. Great. And up to 6 kilowatts. Now this is right on the base of the Queensboro Bridge. So, I mean, it's Sunday, so, you know, bear that in mind. It's not the busiest time in New York City. But this guy's charging, no problem, in his ID3. Sorry, not ID3. i3, that's going to be confusing over time. And so are we now at 7 kilowatts. You can see we've got about 22% of the battery left there. We've used a little more than the full capacity. Obviously the stop in Rhode Island topped us over what we needed to get into the city. Efficiency is not great. Obviously my speeds initially didn't help, and then a little bit of air conditioning, although it's not showing up on the climate settings yet. To the best of my knowledge, obviously the parking is going to cost, but this is free. The charge in Rhode Island was free, and aside from the last 18% maybe that we had the top off at home, so that's at domestic prices, we got free charging all last week across Volta charging in our grocery shop, and the Electrify America station that was free temporarily at Burlington Mall. So essentially this trip so far, to do this 238 miles and whatever we get after it, has been no charge, no cost, except for the $2 at home. So that's another benefit of electric driving. For our purposes, this was great. You know, we were able to get in. The fast chargers were not all installed properly, so we couldn't use them, but it's good to see them there. And we were able to just hook up to the 7 kilowatt level 2 charger, get some juice whilst we walked over to do the Polestar space and the test drive. Then, you know, hang out in New York City a little bit, walk back, and got a good bump up in range there. Went from, you know, being pretty much down to 15-20% of the battery, back up to about 50% midway. So, you know, always good to charge whilst you're doing something else. Whenever you're visiting somewhere, people tend to think, you know, well, there's nowhere to charge, what could I do? Or, you know, there's nowhere for me to fast charge. Well, if you can find a level 2 destination charger, you're going to get to the city, the town, whatever, and do something there, right? So this is at least 2 hours on a charger, probably more like 4, as it was in this case, and that's going to get you close to 100 miles back. So it's a decent bump to then get out of the city again and go to another fast charging stop. So homeward leg of the trip now then, headed out of New York a slightly different way, headed over to the west side of Manhattan, then up and out of the city from the north through Westchester, Tarrytown kind of area. Wanted to check out the new EV Connect, almost part of the Evolve New York network. I don't think it's officially on there, but may eventually be sucked up into it. It was an EV Connect single DC fast charger at Westchester Landing, which is right by the Mario Cuomo / Tappan Zee Bridge, whichever you prefer based on your local, you know, ideology. But we won't get into the politics of that. We'll just call it what it is. Westchester Landing, and that, you know, so that station again, that's had a couple of level 2 chargers in there for a while. They installed this fast charger under the EV Connect system over the summer. Okay, I don't know if it technically counts as a Evolve New York station, but we need to charge, so let's give it a go. A couple of clipper creaks there. Brand new. Okay, so that is a 175 amp station. Doesn't actually say it's on the Evolve New York network, but it is 30 cents a kilowatt hour, which is the going rate. They've had these clipper creeks here for a while. This has been an EV friendly place, but this is only just gone in. Fast charging went in, I think, August.
Good to see them wherever they can getting these faster charges in. This one would have given up to 100 kilowatts, so again we're maxing out the power of the Bolt by, you know, having quite a bit in reserve if you needed it for a Kona electric or a Kia Niro EV, one of those cars that, you know, charges underneath that 100 kilowatt band. I think it works as an individual charging site. You know, you're probably not going to have a pretty big thoroughfare there. There are certainly, you know, busier corridors that are going to be served by the new Evolve New York, you know, 4 times 150 kilowatt stations that are going in across the states and eventually along the thruway. But this was a nice site. You know, I was glad that it was there to check out so close to the city. Debates about what fast charging should cost, whether it should be very close to domestic rates or whether it's expected to pay 2 or 3 times as much because of the speed and convenience and the cost of the equipment. But in this case, you know, it was 30 cents a kilowatt hour, and that seemed about right. You know, I don't really have any truck with paying for that in a site that's useful. So finished up there, headed off into the dark, back up into Connecticut, and that's where we did the last Coffee and Kilowatts. Actually, the test there to stop in Manchester, Connecticut, on one of the newer Electrify America sites, and also now on per kilowatt hour pricing. So we were able to do that test there, just bumping up 15 kilowatt hours, get a price for that, and then do the same in Massachusetts a few days later, so that we could just compare the two. Obviously found, as you'll see if you watch that Coffee and Kilowatts episode, link in the description, that it's about half the price at the moment on per minute Electrify America for a Bolt EV or similar charging car. So there's that disparity there. You can see all that discussion in the video. That's been some good commentary on that. But you know, per kilowatt hour pricing is the future. That kind of showed where most of these states are going to be going, and that's what you can expect to see. So on from there, just a little bump again. It was only I think 15-16 minutes along those lines back up to Massachusetts. We would actually have had enough to get home. I wanted to try and do the per minute versus per kilowatt hour test right on that same day, which I did want to do in Auburn, Massachusetts, which is a pretty cool looking site. You know, there's something, I think it's 8 or 10 fast chargers, the new Signet machines that have gone in. A lot of these Electrify America sites in the northeast and down the east coast that have been retrofitted, pulling out the old FSEC faulty equipment and replacing them with a newer Signet. These are the ones that have the black sidings. You'll see all this in Electrify America's latest press shots, whatever they're announcing, usually accompanied by one of these newer Signet units. So they had a bunch of these, but they couldn't get a session to hold at the 50-55 kilowatt max of the Bolt as I had in Connecticut. May have been charging it too soon after. It was only about, you know, 45-50 minutes after charging it in Connecticut. So I'm not convinced that it was the Bolt EV itself, but I would get these charging sessions that started up okay around that 50 kilowatt rate, and then they would just fluctuate. You could go down, the power gauge is saying it's not getting any charge, and then fluctuated all the way back up to 70 kilowatts, which is, you know, not possible for the Bolt EV to take on a sustained fast charge. So it was just bizarre. I mean, this was, you know, again, as I say, it was more attempting to do the session because we wanted the 15 kilowatt hours in a per minute state in Massachusetts to compare with the 15 kilowatt hours in the per kilowatt hour state of Connecticut.
That looks to have settled down. We've just hit 50%. I'm not sure if we'll have quite enough space underneath the... Oh, there it goes again. Yep, let's just show itself off. Well, I'm gonna leave that because it doesn't sound fun. Okay, well that was 7 kilowatt hours plus whatever we got before. Who knows? Very odd indeed.
People haven't seen, you know, in three and a half years of driving a Bolt EV, from the 2017 onto this 2020 now, never seen behavior like that on the power gauge when trying to fast charge. It looked much more like a, you know, coming off a interstate when you heavily regen and have the regen on demand pedal pushed down hard. That's when you're going to get to those higher levels of regeneration of power. But it was bizarre, it was odd, strange to end the journey that way, but again, we got home no problems. So as I say, a fairly, you know, not a large road trip, not one of our bigger ones with being under 500 miles and all within one day. But, you know, so enough things that were of note and different types of charging location. Thought it brought up a few topics from the park and ride locations, which are, you know, useful but not necessarily packed with the amenities you would like, to the, you know, places that were with the amenities but didn't have the charging in Connecticut, all the way through to whether you need level 2 or fast charging in a city, whether it should be, you know, it's okay for it to be behind a parking garage, you know, kind of paywall if you like, or if you should have some kind of system where you can get in and out. Should city centre parking stations even be, you know, a place for DC fast charging? That's a question in itself. It was a fun trip, easy enough to do in a day. You know, really any kind of delays were prompted by myself wanting to check out different charge stations and go circuitous routes. So, you know, it was more a case of, if you wanted to, you know, just drive straight into the heart of the city with minimal charging stops, you know, you could quite easily do that. A little bump on the way down into the city, you could charge for a bit longer and make most of the way back. So I would guess you could do it with more efficient driving and, you know, slightly better planning, route planning in 2 charge stops. And one of those being across dinner on the way back would pretty much mean that the day trip was, you know, uninterrupted by charging activities. So just a little interesting asides. I hope there's some topics in there for you to get your teeth into. If you have any questions on the trip itself, or if it raises a topic that you'd like us to dive into a little deeper, maybe on a future Coffee and Kilowatts, let us know in the comments. Always appreciate your views. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.